Good morning. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. I am Barry Bryson. We're continuing our study of Psalm 103 as we finish up our study of the wisdom psalms of David. This is the last wisdom psalm of David in the hymn book. It's also a praise song, and it is directly connected to Psalm 90, as we've said the last few days. And we're in the middle of looking at the text of Psalm 103. We're going to look at verses 6 through 10 today. In verses 1 through 5 that we talked about yesterday, David begins this song of praise by saying, "Bless the Lord, my soul, O my soul. All that is within me, bless his holy name." And so it starts as personally as it possibly can with David, not just talking, about himself, but to himself and to his eternal self, to his soul, and all that is within me. And then the benefits that he remembers is salvation. It's grace. And so he's going to continue to celebrate that grace and our forgiveness of sins all the way through verses 11 and 12 and beyond. Right now, though, we want to look at verses 6 through 10, and he asserts something else, and then he has an important quote contained within these verses. So let's read verses 6 through 10. The Lord's works are righteousness. The Lord works, righteousness and justice for all who are oppressed. He made known his ways to Moses and his acts to the people of Israel. The Lord is merciful and gracious, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love. He will not always chide, nor will he keep his anger forever. He does not deal with us according to our sins, nor repay us according to our iniquities. So David continues to maintain God's graciousness to us, and that he gives us grace, not what we deserve, which creates an issue for any of us who believe that God's righteousness has to be in some way vindicated, justified. For those of us who say, if this is the case, if we don't get what we deserved, how can we call God a righteous judge if he lets us off? Well, we know the answer to that, of course. And the answer to that is he's paid for our sins already on the cross. David doesn't give an explanation, but he maintains God's righteousness. He works righteousness, and he establishes justice, accomplishes justice for all who are oppressed. So he is the enforcer of righteousness and justice. He doesn't explain how that can be, and maybe he doesn't know. But there are things we know to be true all at the same time, like the fact that God is omnipotent, and yet we have free will, or that Jesus is fully human and fully divine at the same. How can that be, that Jesus is fully human and fully divine at the same time? We don't know how it can be, but we know that it's true because it's in the Word. How can it be that God is all-powerful, that nothing happens apart from God, if we're going to have free will and are responsible for the exercise of free will? We don't know how, but we know that it's true. We know it because the Word tells it to us. And so David, at this point, may not comprehend at all how it can be that God is both gracious and righteous at the same time, but he knows that it's true, and he communicates it in Psalm 103, and it puts him in his understanding ahead of anybody else in the Old Testament. He made known his ways to Moses, his acts to the people of Israel, and then he's got that connection with Psalm 90, going back to Moses. And then he quotes something God said to Moses on Mount Sinai, Deuteronomy chapter 23, verse 6. Whenever the covenant is renewed, and God is speaking to Moses as he reiterates the covenant and repeats his laws. And he says these very words, the Lord, that Yahweh is merciful and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in steadfast love. God said that himself, and God said it to Moses. He also goes on to say he's going to forgive our sins, but he's not going to let us get away with bad behavior. And it's unclear in the passage whether he's talking about eternal punishment or whether he's talking about earthly consequences. But he makes clear in the passage that that his righteousness and his graciousness coexist together. And so David's read that passage. David knows it. David has memorized it and internalized it. And he's communicating it back to Moses himself, really, whenever he's having this conversation with Moses between Psalm 103, Psalm 90. Of course, they don't live at the same time. They live 300 years apart. But in a sense, he's having a dialogue with this song that he's known all of his life. And he's saying to Moses, everything you said about humanity is true. However, this is also true, and you should know this, because these are words Yahweh said to you directly. He will not always chide nor keep his anger forever. That reminds me so much of Hosea chapter 11, which is going to happen later during the divided kingdom, not long before the northern kingdom goes into captivity. So 300 years separated from David in the future. Moses is 300 years in the past. Hosea is 300 years in the future. And in Hosea chapter 11, we have God himself speaking to the northern kingdom on the eve of Assyrian captivity, saying, my heart is turned over within me. I am not going to come against you in my furious anger. That's what you deserve, but I can't. I have to do what's right for you right now, which is to take you into captivity because of your idolatrous behavior. But I'm not going to give you what you deserve. I can't. You're my child. And my heart is turned over within me. And I'm God. I get to decide what I'm going to do. Read Hosea chapter 11. It's an amazing chapter. And it is God himself saying what David says about God in Psalm 103, verse 9. And then verse 10, he does not deal with us according to our sins, nor pay us according to our iniquities. David knows this firsthand. He knows it firsthand. Read 2 Samuel chapter 12. After he had done what he did with Bathsheba and Uriah, after he is prosecuted by Nathan the prophet and he repents, God forgives him. And yet there are consequences to his actions. But it's not what he deserved. It's not in any way is it what he deserved. David has lived this himself in his own life. He's going to express this even more powerfully in the coming verses, this notion of grace. We'll pick up with verse 11 next time. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word.